inland to safe shelter. And with the population in Beaufort County now, 166,000 plus whatever tourist population we might have on that day, it's easily going to take us 20 to 24 hours to get everyone out of harm's way. So leave early.
The Category 5 storm, were we ever to get one, it's my understanding the storm surge on that would be all the way to Yemassee. Is that correct?
It'd be further than that. We've got these maps on the wall. You can't see them from the cameras here, but pretty much if you look over here, maybe this camera can catch this one, all green. It's Category 5 scenario. The entire county plus a whole lot of coastal Jasper and a little bit of Hampton County would be totally inundated for anywhere from 20 feet of water to 2 or 3 feet, depending on the elevation. But we're talking total inundation, and it does not have to be what the Weather Service classifies as a Category 5 storm. The categories, the Saffir-Simpson scale, only deals with the wind speeds. It has nothing to do with storm surge. A Category 1 wind speed storm at the right angle, on the right tides, at the right forward speed, could give us 15, 18, 20 feet of water.
That's incredible.
Just remember, the categories deal only with the wind, not with the storm surge.
All right, we'll pick up a little bit on the evacuation theme in a minute, but talking about flooding and all, Jeff Altoff with Insurance Services of Beaufort. Flood insurance, a lot of people have seen huge increases in their premiums, especially if they're in low-lying areas on an island, barrier island. What hope and ideas can you offer to make it worthwhile to people to go ahead and maintain their flood insurance policies?
Well, thank you, Rick. Certainly flood has been in the news and hot topic here lately. The federal government has been doing a lot of things to try to improve the National Flood Insurance Program from the standpoint that they've been losing money. The big storms, Sandy, certainly, Katrina before that, basically decimated the funding. So they've been making moves to try to, make it more sound financially. Unfortunately, that's had a big effect on people around Beaufort County, and some in areas where you wouldn't even think. People such as in Mossy Oaks, for example, you wouldn't think that would necessarily be an area that would be hard hit, but they've been hit very hard with premiums. So a couple things you can do. One, we encourage you to get with an insurance agent that knows the flood insurance rules. It is a federal government program, so basically every agent has the same program and is administering the same rates. So it's really about getting with somebody knowledgeable. And you want to look at things like, are you carrying enough deductible? Are you even carrying flood? I mean, you'll mention the Category 5 storm surge. It won't matter if you're in a C zone, a B zone, an A zone, how big of a hazard, you're probably going to experience flooding. So if you don't have a flood policy right now, it's a good time to explore that option.
And most mortgage holders are going to require it of you anyway.
I mean, if you're in what they call a high hazard or a special flood hazard zone, certainly you're going to be required. But if you're not, for example, I live on Ladies Island in what is deemed a C zone, a low hazard. My mortgage company doesn't require it. But I certainly have it because I know that given the right storm at the right time, we're certainly susceptible to flood.
Now, the flood policy itself, it's covered, there are certain components of it that fall beyond just hurricane, for example, right?
Oh, yes, certainly.
What are some of the other instances where you're going to engage the flood policy?
So in a layman's term, the flood definition is basically rising water emanating from away from the premises. So you're talking about water coming from outside of your home or your building or dwelling and rising up from the ground.
So my waterbed breaking is not going to fall under that then?
Probably not. But like the storm we had Friday night where we had, an inordinate amount of rain in a quick time, that rising water certainly did cause some flooding. We've also seen just some high tide surge out on Harbor Island, for example, has gotten some floods, and that's from nothing more than a high tide, a spring tide flooding those homes, and that could be generating a claim as well.
All right. Talk a little bit more about not only only flood policies, but also wind and hail, because certainly that's going to fall into the scheme of things with a hurricane. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that right after this. Easy for me to say. I knew I should have had a Mountain Dew before I got here.
Oh, a Mountain Dew?
I haven't yawned yet.
Okay. All right. Since our break, I got a little taller.
What?
Our agency is Low Country Insurance.
What did I say?
Insurance Services of Beaufort, which is what it used to be called, and that's okay.
Okay.
It's hasn't been too long.
It has been.
Well, we're back on Coastline talking about the emergency operations that...
Had an earthquake.
My arm hit the
Earthquake. Oh, yeah.
Hey!
Our next topic.
Stand by.
Well, we're back on Coastline talking about what to do and what will happen if a hurricane should be out in the Atlantic Ocean and threatening Beaufort County. And first of all, I want to stand corrected. I said that Jeff was with a company that is no longer. He has changed Insurance Services Beaufort to Low Country Insurance Services, so I apologize for that.
Thank you, Rick.
New name and a new day, but still
Yes, sir.
providing quality service, I'm sure.
We're here and in Bluffton.
All right, terrific. And we're talking about what to do in the event of an evacuation. And let's, before we get to people, let's talk about pets. Tallulah Trice, you handle all of the shelters for animals here in Beaufort County, as well as you're on the forefront of microchipping animals. So tell us a little bit about what happens in your department in the event of a storm.
We also handle livestock, which is a big thing in Beaufort County. So our main thing is for people to learn microchipping is so important to do, not only with your dogs and cats, but also your horses, any animal that you actually want back, because that's the only way we can identify the owner. Because I was at Katrina when it happened, and it was so confusing because we had so many black labs, and people would call and say, I lost my black lab. Well, it's just not organized. But with a microchip, we can scan it, and we can pull up the owner's information, emergency contact, and our shelter can provide the microchipping. We can enter the data for the person for just $25.
Okay, if let's say somebody has their animal microchipped at a veterinarian, does that information go into your database as well, or is it better to just go directly to you to have it done?
You can do it at the vet, and we're trying to implement a program in our county where that would be part of our licensing, having every microchip in our system. Because in a disaster, it's going to help us, identify the owners quicker than getting on the phone and calling one of the services.
Now, when somebody's pet is, part of an evacuation, and they may not have made a sufficient plan to take it with them, what are your recommendations? Should they drop them off at your location, or?
No, we advise not to drop it because, again, we're dealing with animals that are stray. We're going to have to deal with the after effects of after a storm or any other disaster. So we need that space free. We can't hold people's pet. We're not a boarding facility. So they really need to be prepared, have crates, have rabies certificates with them, everything in one location, and make sure they can take their pet. If they can't, they need to find like a boarding facility wherever they're going in the area.
And you've got a relationship with some of the boarding facilities here. Is it your sense that they're as best as can be hurricane-proof or hurricane-safe?
They've got, boarding facilities. We have Hilton Head Humane, which, have over 100 dogs and 200 cats. They have crates ready. They're all ready to go because they're going to have to evacuate not only boarding facilities, but, also the Humane Societies locally.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just important that people get prepared and take whatever is theirs with them because we're not going to be able to help with that.
So in the event of a major storm, then really it's just better to take your animal with you.
Yes, and there's so many hotels now that accept pets.
Okay.
Now horses is a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
But you should have a trailer.
Well, you can get a
accessible.
suite and,
Yes.
you know.
But the main thing is that any animal you have, you should be prepared to move it, whether it's a trailer, call a friend. You know, there's so many outlying areas, you know, in South Carolina and Georgia that would help if they need assistance.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's encouraging, and that also brings us to, in the event of an evacuation, Neil, what routes have been predetermined? And I know when we evacuated probably, I want to say probably 9 or 10 years ago, maybe even longer than that, for a particular storm, we ended up going out on I-16, and it took us about 10 hours to get as far as Milledgeville. At one point, they finally got wise and opened both lanes of traffic in the same direction. When do those decisions come into play, and is there a set number of evacuation routes that is static, or does that change given the storm?
No, it does not change, Rick. Those decisions are made in January. We have the state of South Carolina divided into 3 conglomerates. The State Highway Patrol has done that, northern, central, and southern, and we're in the southern conglomerate. And we have 2 parallel routes. There's 7 total in the state, but 2 of them belong to the southern conglomerate, basically Beaufort County. And if you wait until a mandatory evacuation order, you're going to take one of those 2 routes. If you want to go wherever you want to go, you better leave early. I-16 is no longer an option for Beaufort County. We've had a number of meetings with the state of Georgia, and that is the primary evacuation route for Chatham County and Effingham. And so if you go down there, you will see the barrier arms on the off-ramps. That is so they can control access, not just from South Carolina, but just control the access, because doing a reversal is so dangerous, and they will be doing that. So our 2 routes, if you live in the southern part of the county, if you live on Hilton Head, you're going out Highway 278, and you're going out 3 lanes wide, because we now have 3 lanes up to the McGarvey's intersection. One lane there, the far right lane, is going to peel off and go up Highway 462 to I-95 north. The next 2 lanes are going to go out to I-95, and the right lane there is going to drop off and go on to I-95 north, and the other lane is going to stay on 278, US 17, which runs together, and you're going to go up into Hampton and go west in Hampton, and you're going to end up in Augusta at I-20. If you live in Bluffton, in interior Bluffton, you're going out through Hardyville on 46, and then you're going to be placed on US 321, and you're going to go out through the country until you get again to North Augusta and Interstate 20. If you live in northern Beaufort County, you're going to go out either Highway 303 through Walterboro to Highway 64, end up in Augusta on I-20, or you're going to go out Highway 68 through Hampton and Barnville and end up in Augusta, or you're going one lane of it's going to be placed on I-95 North. 95 North is not our savior, if you would, in evacuations, because it's already overloaded on any given day. So we can only put so much traffic on 95. Most of it we're pushing west to Augusta.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you wait to a mandatory order, chances are 2 out of 3 you're going to end up in Augusta.
Mm-hmm.
And from there you're going to be pushed west towards Atlanta and Birmingham and Nashville and Knoxville.
And if you wait until a mandatory evacuation, you're also likely going to be waiting a long time in line.
Traffic
right?
will be moving slow. Our goal is to move it at 30 mile an hour. If we can do that, we're excited. But again, like I said, pushing off Hilton Head, we're pushing 3 lanes wide until you get to McGarvey's. Then we're pushing 2 lanes wide until you get to I-95. And west of I-95, there are no 4-lane roads in lower South Carolina. Well, there's a little stretch here and there, a mile or 2, but no serious 4-lane highways. And so 2-lane roads moving a lot of traffic over, it's going to move slowly. That's just the way, it's the nature of the beast. And so we encourage folks, if you have the ability to leave early, a storm's threatening, and you know that an evacuation is looming, and you want to go to Virginia, or you want to go to New York, or to visit the grandkids, go in that direction then, because mandatory, you won't be going in that direction.
So probably one of the better suggestions we can offer then is, rather than rely on a hotel chain, which is already going to be booked way early into the storm, try and find some relatives that you can stay with.
Family and friends is a better option, because hotels, as far west as Atlanta. Atlanta's the first big city with a lot of hotel space. And Macon, during the Floyd evacuation in 1999, which was our last full-blown evacuation, Macon filled up in the first 2 or 3 hours because it was taking our traffic and Chatham County's and then people were pushing on to Atlanta and Knoxville and Birmingham. So yes, family and friends is your best first option. Hotels, make the reservations early. Storm pops up and it starts tracking in this direction. The cone that the National Hurricane Center is putting out includes South Carolina. Call up to wherever and make a hotel reservation then for 3 or 4 days in advance. You can always cancel it and not lose anything, unless if you're going to a hotel. And then of course your last option is to go into a general population shelter. And the Red Cross runs these shelters. They're there to protect your life and provide life-sustaining support. That's all. You're going to be in a Red Cross shelter. You have 15 square feet allotted to you per person. That's not very much.
No.
That's 3 feet by 5 feet.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's what you're going to have. And you're not going to have a cot unless you bring your own. So
I'm in trouble. I just figured I'm 6 feet tall.
Yes, sir.
I'm 3 feet wide.
You're encroaching on someone else's space.
That's not good at
So
all.
you're going to sit up in your space. You're not going to stretch out.
Okay.
All right? So that's what you're going to run into in a shelter, because again we're sheltering as many people as we can, and so you're going to run into that. No pets are allowed in any shelter in South Carolina. We don't have any pet-friendly shelters. That is a problem. We know it because the number of people who have pets, and a pet is a member of the family. We're working on that issue, but how do you address that issue when Jeff is in the shelter and I've got my German Shepherd, but Jeff is allergic to dog dander, and I'm in my 15 square feet, and he's in his 15. He's having a reaction. So we're having to deal with that. And the governor has given us some guidance to energetically look for a solution to this, and we're working on it. Everybody in South Carolina Emergency Management we've come together in a number of meetings to discuss this. But if you've got a pet, general population shelter is probably not your option.
Do we have shelters here in Beaufort County?
Not for hurricanes. No, sir. We do not have any pre-storm shelters because of the surge problem.
Okay. Assuming, let's say, Category 3, because we're very rarely going to see Category 5 here in Beaufort, unless
Anywhere for that matter. They're very rare storms.
Yeah. What is the minimal amount that you would recommend somebody to go? Somebody who's got a lot of business here in the Beaufort area, they need to get back quickly.
Well, the first concern is somewhere where you can stay. Okay, let's say you evacuate to Aiken. Well, there's only a limited number of hotel rooms in Aiken, so you may have to go further. You may have to go to Atlanta, Macon, this sort of thing. But getting back is all going to depend. Once the governor's mandatory evacuation order goes into effect, you're not going to be allowed back in until the governor lifts that order. And then the governor's going to probably turn it over to local authorities to make that call. We're not going to allow the general population back in until we know that the roads are safe to travel, i.e. we've moved all live power lines that may be down across the roads. We've inspected all the bridges to make sure they are structurally sound to withstand traffic. We don't want to send cars across a causeway and have it collapse underneath them. Then we've got a more serious problem. And then we also want to make sure we have a functioning hospital. And so our number one goal is to get the roads open to the hospitals, both Beaufort Memorial, Navy, Hilton Head, and Coastal over on neighboring Georgia, in neighboring Jasper County. Get those open, get the roads open to them. Then we'll start letting people come back in. We might have a curfew situation, a dawn to dusk curfew, depending on the destruction, and that's going to drive the whole thing. If we've got catastrophic destruction, we're not going to let people just flood back in because there'll be people taking opportunities, vandalism, looting. So we're going to have to be controlling that. We encourage everyone when they leave, take identification with you so that you can prove, yes, I live at in Planter's Circle. I live on Ladies Island. Here's my address.
Okay, so for the person that's now thinking to themselves, okay, there's no way I'm going to get back here in any reasonable amount of time, and maybe I'd just be better off weathering it out. Are they violating the law if a mandatory evacuation's been called?
They are. The governor's order is law, because at that point the governor will have declared a state of emergency, and the governor's order is law. And so you are taking a considerable risk if you choose to weather it. And there's always a percentage of the population that does. But what they need to understand is if you're going to try and weather it, you need to be prepared to sustain yourself for probably 5 days. That's water, food, you're probably not going to have electricity. may not have a roof on your house if you survive that. And we may not can get to you for 4 or 5 days to provide any support. So if you choose to stay, you've got to be able to take care of yourself completely. You trusting that your house is going to survive it. Most houses around here have pine trees around them. Those trees are coming down.
I've heard it said by fire department officials that when they encounter somebody door to door, they say, I'm not going to move. They just ask them, okay, can I have a name of next of kin so we know where to tell them to pick you up?
We do the same thing. We have forms with all that information. We fill it out. It's transmitted up here to the sheriff's desk, which is right behind us, and we store that for post-storm.
All right. We're talking about what to do in the event of a hurricane or a major storm heading towards Beaufort County. And we'll talk a little bit more about that right after this. Okay, so now we'll hit the claims.
All right.
If you want to
And I
talk
can't get
about,
back here
if you want to talk about pythons
take the
and
call.
lionfish, right, Rob?
Ooh, lionfish.
No, that people's aquariums and their snakes, which is a lot in this county, that they've got to find a place for them because that's the problem that happened in Florida.
Oh,
Yes,
Oh, my
because of
goodness.
Hurricane Andrew, correct? Yeah.
oh, that's
So-
not good.
And they're destroying Florida.
Right.
And they're destroying our fisheries.
And you're aware that we've got a quantity
Yes.
of these here?
Oh, yes.
You would
Lionfish
be
are
amazed
here,
at
huh?
things my deputies see when they go in houses. You would be
Shocking.
amazed.
And we have to deal with them.
Oh,
Think
yes.
of that.
Stand by.
Oh.
15 seconds out.
Gotta get better chairs.
Yeah, really.
Stand by.
Well, during our coastline break, Tallulah Trice was informing me that one of the things we never consider when there is an evacuation and the potential for a storm hitting are reptiles. And apparently there are a lot of people that have snakes and what
many,
else?
Many people in Beaufort County. And, pythons, of course, are the worst as we can see what's happening to Florida Everglades.
What happened down there when Andrew hit?
Well, when Andrew hit, basically, they didn't take them with them. So they escaped, they multiplied. I don't know how many babies they have at once, but it's quite many. And so it just, they encroached in the Everglades and have taken over. And then the lionfish, which is huge, and we see them out on our wrecks, out in the water, they're destroying a lot of the fisheries that we have because they don't have a predator against them because, they've got the poison tentacles.
And lionfish are things you find in people's aquariums?
Yes. They're not from here, so they really shouldn't be here, but, they are in people's houses.
I guess you run into a few things at people's houses when you visit.
When we go for calls for service, when the road deputies do, the things that they see would surprise, shock, and amaze you. The number of exotic animals and reptiles that people own in Beaufort County.
So what would you recommend that they do? Take their animal with
Yes,
them?
take them, because
Even
they-
a fish in an aquarium, you just kind of stick it in the
It's
SUV?
their responsibility, and for them to put it in our system, is wrong.
Yeah.
So it's something that they need to take responsibility for.
All right, that's something we
So
generally don't
think
think of.
twice about what you purchase.
Absolutely. Well, I don't have to think twice. I don't even have to think once. There's no way I'd be getting a tiger fish or a python.
Yeah.
We're talking about some of the damage that occurs in a major storm, and we never really like to think about it, but it sometimes is an eventuality that you deal with on a regular basis, Jeff. What about the claim? When entire communities are devastated, is that policy going to be there for those people?
Well, Rick, I certainly think that all the policies are going to be there, and as a matter of fact, the state of South Carolina has an emergency fund in case any of these insurance companies go out of business. Generally, they're going to be there to handle most of the claim. But a couple things you can do. One is we recommend that everybody take a video, take your smartphone and take a video of your possessions, walk around your house, store it on your phone, or even email it to your insurance agent. That way, if you have a major loss and you get a pile of paperwork and it says, list everything you have in your living room and when you bought it and what it costs, you've got at least a basis to start and some video evidence when you're negotiating with an adjuster. So that's one thing you can do in advance. On the backside, Neil just said that myself and my employees at Low Country Insurance, we're not going to get back into this county any sooner than anybody else. So if you have a claim, you should know what insurance company you're with and how to get a hold of that company directly. Sure, your agent wants to for you, but you should know the number for whatever company you have. And then, as well, you are also required and responsible to mitigate your claim. In other words, you are supposed to prevent further damage once a claim occurs to as much of an extent as you can. So if you are back on the, at your premises, you need to tarp things up, try to protect the things that aren't damaged as much as possible so that things go smoothly for you in the event of a claim.
Yeah, because of course, if you've got an open gaping hole in your roof and another storm comes, then you're going to add to the damage. And if you haven't taken that problem in hand, that's not going to be covered then, right?
Right. That can definitely create an issue on your claim, and it can be as little as just tarping up a hole like that, or calling in a contractor or a roofer to help you, or even a neighbor. I mean, showing some effort and doing what you can goes a long way to getting a good claim settlement. Ultimately, you want to be rebuilt from how you were before the storm.
And will the national companies be sending in teams of adjusters to accommodate the situation?
Oh, yes. I have never been through one of the major storms, but I've certainly studied them and talked to agents and other industry folks, and typically you're going to see huge teams bringing their own, tractor trailers full of mobile offices, and they'll have people on the ground writing checks on the spot, getting people through this as best they can. It'll be a real time to perform.
All right. Now, one of the things we don't talk about much is Beaufort and Charleston are on a major earthquake fault. Isn't that correct?
Absolutely.
Do you ever sell any earthquake policies?
Yes, most people don't know that, like flood, earthquake is also not a covered peril in your homeowner's policy, at least in the base policy. So you either have to add it in as an optional coverage or buy a separate earthquake policy if you want that. And I would say in our office, maybe 20% of our customers actually purchase the coverage. In other words, they are concerned enough to have, the peace of mind to want to have that coverage on their policy. And certainly, I think it's been 100 years since a major earthquake came down this far, but certainly there's one that hit on Hunting Island that was considered major and could cause damage. The good news about our area is most of our homes are built with frame structure for the most part, and that's very, it's able to take some movement. It gives a little bit more than masonry, like in Florida, the cement block homes. So that certainly is some